Floodgate is an unofficial Yu-Gi-Oh term that basically means a card that has a continuous effect that stops one or both players from doing a particular kind of action. For example, you could say Necrovalley is a Floodgate because it prevents both players from moving cards out of the graveyard by any means. TCG players probably have a whole bunch of PTSD from a bunch of Floodgate that they've had to deal with over the years. Like Mystic Mine, which completely shuts off attacking and monster effects for the player that has more monsters on the field, and Vanity's Emptiness, which shuts off special summoning for both players. I bet a bunch of others are coming to your mind too, and you're probably really glad that those cards aren't in Duel Links, right? Well, some of them are in Duel Links, bro. I know, it's very sad. You might actually be surprised how many we have in the game, to be honest, since they aren't used that often. It is that most of these aren't versatile enough to be main deckable in the best of one format of Duel Links Ranked. Usually, Floodgates are a pretty rare sight in Duel Links, because it's pretty rare that a competitive deck doesn't get equally hurt by a Floodgate if they choose to play it. I mean, you could play Necrovalley in your zombie deck if you're a masochist, I guess, but everybody else is a bit less willing to shoot themselves in the foot for no reason. Sometimes if a deck doesn't care about the downsides of a Floodgate, you'll see them playing it, like Ancient Warriors being able to play Dimensional Fissure, and Magician's Magic Dark Magician being able to play Necrovalley. But we are in a bit of a weird time in dueling where Floodgates aren't a rare sight anymore. There are currently 4 top tier decks that play Floodgates, so you might actually be more likely to see Floodgates than you are to see Drake fans admitting that he lost the beef. The Floodgates we all have to deal with right now are Evil Swarm Ophion, which turns off both players' ability to summon level 5 or higher monsters, El Shaddai Winda, which makes it so both players can only special summon once per turn, Herald of the Arclight, which makes it so that any monster that would be sent from hand or deck to grave is banished instead, Necrovalley, which we talked about earlier, and Summon Breaker, which skips the current turn right to the end phase if the turn player summons 3 times. The thing about Floodgates is that since their effects just outright prevent a whole action, you can't look at them the same way you'd look at any other kind of interruption. An interruption generally just deals with one particular thing, but with a Floodgate, it doesn't matter how many cards you have. If that Floodgate stops you from doing your strategy, you're just shit out of luck, unless you have a way to stop it. If you're a deck that needs to special summon a level 5 or higher monster, but your opponent has an Ophion, and you don't have a way to stop that Ophion, then you just don't get to play your deck at all. If you're a deck that needs to send monsters from hand or deck to grave, but your opponent has a Herald, you're shit out of luck if you don't have a way to deal with it. If you're a deck that special summons more than once per turn, and you don't have a way to stop the opponent's Winda, you better have something in hand to deal with her, or else you're screwed. Then deal with Necrovalley and Summon Breaker. You get the point. You gotta already have a way to deal with them if you want to play the game at all, if they stop what your deck does. You might think, if you can just use one card that completely counters your opponent's whole strategy, that would be kind of unfair, right? One card dealing with a whole last strategy? Well, you'd be sorely mistaken, actually, because clearly, if all these cards are legal, then they have to be fair, right? Right? Surely. It must be really enjoyable for everybody to just hope they draw that out, and if they don't, then it just... If I'm going to be real though, I don't think Floodgate should exist. To me, it just comes down to the point that one card shouldn't shut off an entire strategy. That doesn't mean I'm not going to play Floodgates. Like, at the end of the day, guys, we can't just pretend we live in a delusional world where everything is the way we want it to be. We live in the real world where Floodgates are legal, and one of the main ways you can get an advantage over your opponent. So basically what I'm saying is, don't hate the player, hate the game. Okay, we've had our time complaining and crying, but enough. It's time to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and actually do something about all this mess. Winda making it so you can only special summon once per turn is a pretty big deal, but she is also indestructible by card effects, so there's that protecting her too. If we want to win the game when the opponent's got a Winda out, we're going to need something that doesn't destroy but still deals with her. Let's just get the obvious one out of the way. You can use Forbidden Chalice or Forbidden Droplet to negate her for the turn, or use Book of Moon to flip her down, so you can go about your special summons without any issues. Another way to win against Winda, since it does have to be summoned in a Shadow deck, is to interrupt Shadows in a way that they don't get to summon Winda. When they try to add Schism back to their hand with the grave effect of Construct, you could negate the Construct with Skullmeister. You could banish the Schism with DD Crow, and if they do successfully get back the Schism to use on your turn, you could use Cosmic or MST in response to the Schism's effect so that their fusion summon doesn't resolve. Just make sure you respond to the effect to fusion summon, not just to it being flipped up, otherwise they'll be able to chain. You could also try to prevent them from getting Schism in the grave in the first place by negating Construct with Veiler or Ghost Mourner, though they can play around that by having Squamata send it for them, but the option is there if they can't use Squamata. The other way you can win against Winda is just by playing a deck that can one way or another just deal with Winda without needing to special summon more than once. If you're a deck that puts pressure on board quickly, like Battle Chronicle Blue Eyes, then you can just normal summon your Blue Eyes, and that's already something that can set up an interruption with your skill, and something that can deal with Winda by battle. They'd have to use Schism to summon Construct instead so that they wouldn't be getting Winda, and even so, if you can get out an alternative, then you'll still be in business regardless. Another example is Tenyi. You could normal summon one of your level 4 or lower monsters, link it off into Monk as your one special summon, and then with no more special summons available, you can activate Vishuda from hand to bounce the opponent's Winda so you can special summon more. You might have some way or another in your own deck to deal with Winda with one special summon or less, and if your deck does have a way, then mention it in the comments so newer players can see what kinds of decks inherently deal with Winda. Herald banishes any monster that would be sent to your grave from your hand or from your deck. So generally, if your deck doesn't really care about sending monsters from hand or deck to grave, that part isn't going to be a big deal. But Herald also has a quickie to tribute itself and negate any type of card. So if you don't worry about the continuous effect, you still gotta worry about the Omni Negate. The best way to deal with an Omni Negate or any kind of negate is to bait it out with some type of threatening effect. Dark Hole, Book of Moon, Chalice, or any other form of removal or other kind of threat that your deck can set up. It might force the opponent to use their Herald's Omni Negate. The best deck that uses Herald right now is TG's, and they summon it next to Halberd Cannon, so you could use some form of removal on their cannon, and that would force them to use their Omni Negate to protect their cannon so that they can still use its summon negate. By forcing Herald's negate, you also have that Herald tributing itself, meaning that its continuous effect isn't on the field anymore, and you can send monsters from hand and deck to grave again. Mind Control is really nice against Herald because they have no choice but to negate it, because if they let you take it, then you can use it to negate their Halberd's effect. With Book or Chalice, they won't negate it, because even with its effect gone, it will be a body on board protecting their life points, but with Mind Control, they're going to lose the effect and the body one way or another. The way Herald works is going to prevent you from using certain cards, like you can't use Effect Veiler or DD Crow, since they need to be put in the grave specifically to be able to activate. And if you want to use Forbidden Droplet, you can't send monsters from your hand because Droplet wants to put them in grave specifically, and discarding back row would mean that they can just negate it with the Herald anyway, invalidating your minus to some degree. So if you want to send monsters, then you have to send a monster from your field, meaning that against the cannon Herald board, you might need to set a monster face down, otherwise their cannon might negate the summon. Something that might work for both Winda and Herald is Gojira. Kaijus get the job done for them, as well as any other kind of annoying monsters the opponent might have. And you can get one of them for free with SR tickets too. Unfortunately though, Kaijus don't work at all against Ophion. Ophion stops both players from special summoning level 5 or higher monsters, and the Kaijus are all high level, so you aren't even going to be able to summon them. Ophion also sets an interruptive trap from the deck that banishes Ophion to bounce 2 opponent's cards. So just like Herald, it's both a Floodgate effect, but also another interruption that once the interruption is used, it will take the continuous effect off the field. Similarly to Herald, if your deck doesn't care about the continuous effect, then the only thing you need to worry about is that interruption. If that's the case, then getting 2 of your cards bounced in the middle of your combo is still a pretty huge deal, but it does have to target exactly 2 of your cards. So if you're able to threaten Ophion or the trap while only putting 1 card on the field to do so, then they won't be able to respond with their trap. Cosmic or MST getting rid of the back row will get the job done for turning that interruption off too, but Book of Moon will be able to turn off both the trap and the continuous effect, because the trap can't tribute a face down monster, because a face down monster isn't considered an Elsworn monster, and a face down monster's effects can't be applied because it's face down. So it's 2 effects gone for the price of 1 Book of Moon. Dark Hole 2, you can destroy their Ophion and its continuous effect is gone, and they don't have an Elsworn on board to tribute. Easy money. It's the same for Mind Control or Enemy Controller 2, since they won't control the monster to tribute it, but the continuous effect will still be active if you care about special summoning level 5 or higher monsters. I also want to point out Ophion stops level 5 or higher monsters from being special summoned. It doesn't stop them from being normal summoned. So you could just normal summon a Blue Eyes and trigger the skill to search Successor Soul, link off Blue Eyes into Imduk right away, and tribute Imduk and their Ophion to summon another Blue Eyes from deck. This whole process will make it so you never have enough cards on the field for them to use their trap. So you entirely invalidate their trap and their monster with this whole play. Oh, and by the way, it's not just Blue Eyes, alright? My Dark Magician fans out there, you can do the exact same thing. Necrovalley is probably the roughest thing to deal with, since if you are a deck that relies on the grave, it's very likely this is going to prevent you from getting your plays off at all. The most efficient way to get rid of this is with back row removal, Cosmic, MST, but those things you have to draw into, and if you don't draw into them, they aren't going to be saving you from it. You might not even be playing MST or Cosmic either, since many decks just play through back row, since it's often more beneficial to have more impactful cards in your deck that allow you to play more instead of just getting a 1-for-1 trade on back row that might not even be the card you need to hit. You can more easily guarantee access to back row removal without having to draw it if you play back row removal in your extra deck. This could be a Synchro or Xyz that can remove back row, or more generically, it could be Nightmare Phoenix, which on summon discards a card to destroy a back row. If that's what you're going to be relying on to remove Necrovalley, then you're going to need to be able to stick 2 monsters on board in order to summon that extra deck monster. So if all your special summons are graveyard reliant, then you should out of luck. Just sideboard back row removal if your deck loses to Necrovalley pretty much, unless you feel like you should be able to go into Nightmare Phoenix or some other extra deck back row removal and still get other plays off. If the way you summon from grave is with a monster effect on the field, then you can actually use Lance on your own monster so that Necrovalley can't negate its effect. This is pretty niche, but if you are a Lance deck that summons from grave this way, this is an option for you. Obviously, the best way to deal with Necrovalley is to not care about it. If you play a deck that doesn't really get hurt by Necrovalley, you'll be invalidating one of your opponent's cards entirely. Summon Breaker is going to activate to end your turn as soon as you get your 3rd summon for the turn, but the fact that it activates means that it goes on the chain, and we can take advantage of that. If you summon 2 monsters, then make your 3rd summon Nightmare Phoenix, then Summon Breaker is going to go on the chain link as chain link 1, and Nightmare Phoenix is going to go on the chain link as chain link 2, discarding a card to destroy Summon Breaker before it resolves, meaning that Summon Breaker will not successfully resolve. You can keep playing the rest of your turn. Other than that, you're just going to need some other form of back row removal, or you're going to want to be a deck that can either play with less than 3 summons in a turn, or you're going to want to be able to set up a board state that you're comfortable with using only 3 summons. All of these different cards that deal with all these different floodgates, you're probably thinking of how you can put them into your deck to deal with these things. I'll help you out a bit. There's a couple of things you got to keep in mind. First of all, which out of these floodgates affects you and which don't affect you. Like if your deck doesn't care about Winda at all, then you don't need to put anything in your deck to deal with it. Or if your deck has a way within its own strategy to deal with Herald, you don't need to put in extra cards to help you deal with it better. Once you know which floodgates affect you and which don't, then you know which floodgates you're going to need to focus on when building your deck to deal with them. So, if you're going to deal with Ophion, for example, how do you pick which cards you put in your deck to counter it? You could use Book, Chalice, Mind Control, Droplet, back row removal for the Infestation Trap, all depending on what you have available and what works best for your deck. But maybe you also need to worry about Herald, because that hurts your deck too. And even though you aren't going to be going against both in the same duel, you are going to be playing the same deck list on Ranked, and you can't be certain which deck you're going to be paired up against. To help you prepare for both, you should look at all the floodgates you want to be able to deal with, and look at all the cards that deal with those floodgates. See which cards overlap in dealing with each card and pick those. For example, Droplet isn't that good against Herald, even if it's good against Winda. You might pick Chalice or Book or a Kaiju instead, since they will work against both. For another example, Dark Hole isn't going to work against Winda, even though it will work against Ophion, so you might choose Book or Mind Control instead. Once you know which cards overlap when it comes to dealing with the floodgates you're trying to deal with, you can pick the tech cards that you feel are best suited to your deck's playstyle and patch up your deck's weaknesses. Even further, you could see out of those cards that overlap for floodgates, how do they overlap with other kinds of interruptions your opponent might be playing. Once you have a versatile tech choice, it's going to give you a better time against more decks, because it's better to be solid against many decks than to be overpowered against one deck but weak against other decks. Sometimes you just aren't going to have enough room in your deck to include a card that deals with everything though. If that's the case, then just put tech cards that deal with the floodgate that you're most likely to go against so that you're statistically more likely to win. If you're in a tournament with side decking, include tech cards in your side deck that deal with the cards you have trouble facing against, so you're better prepared for the worst case. I asked you guys what you thought about floodgates, and you guys had some pretty good points. Argento Rosa says in his comment that it's okay for them to exist, but only if there's counterplay involved, like the counterplay I talk about in this video. He does point out though that because of the deck size in Duel Links, it's not as easy to fit cards to help counter floodgates in your deck. Maybe if a floodgate has some kind of strict requirement or condition for being used, then that can counteract the power of the floodgate to make sure there is more that the opponent can do to deal with a floodgate perhaps before it comes out or after it comes out. Kind of like how with Winda, there are things you can do to prevent it from coming out in the first place. Jerry Springer says that as long as the version of Yu-Gi-Oh has duels that end within a few turns, there shouldn't be floodgates in that version, because the opponent wouldn't be given an opportunity to draw into their outs for those floodgates, meaning that they can essentially win you the game either by preventing the opponent from playing or by making your opponent climb an uphill battle while you get to play your game plan at a normal pace. Other than that though, Zejected says yes because he enjoys making players suffer. We do have to remember that there are multiple versions of fun for different people. Some people find interactive gameplay fun, and some people find uninteractive gameplay fun, and it's up to Konami to decide which version of fun they're gonna prioritize. Me personally, if I could burn all of the floodgates in the world, I would do it. Send them straight to hell, to never return. Not even coming back like a stink meter. Just staying straight down there in the bottom level of hell to never again see the light of day. In my perfect world, floodgates would not exist.
But this is not a perfect world.
So I'm not just gonna sit here and complain about him, because there are things we can do about him and we can build our decks to help us win against him. But I want to know, how do you guys feel about floodgates in the TCG, OCG, Master Duel, and Duel Links? You might have a take that takes all of these formats into consideration, or you might have a different opinion for each different format. And I would like to know your opinions and the reasons for those opinions so we can see different perspectives and come to understand each other better. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and if you like videos like these, let us know and we can do more. I'm already writing a follow-up to this video about lingering effects, which some might consider even worse than floodgates. So if you're interested in that, let us know too. Other than that, guys, if you like this video, then slap like now, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell to get notified every time we make a new video. Have yourselves a good one, guys, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake, but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon, they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast.